Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our fourth presentation now for the Volleyball BC Coach Development Webinar Series. Tonight, we're lucky to have Ryan and Carol Hofer from out in Langley, and Ryan, of course, the head coach of the Trinity Western Spartans, Carol, the former head coach and current club director with Fraser Valley Volleyball Club. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. So tonight's webinar format will be a presentation by Carol and Ryan. We're going to have a break around where we have some time for some Q&A, and then we'll finish up the presentation and we'll have Q&A that happens after that as well. We've got attendees tonight checking out the webinar on Zoom. And so through the Zoom application, you're able to answer or ask questions through the little Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We also have a chat box where we can just engage in some conversation and say hello to some of the other coaches who are online. It's super grateful of seeing how many people have come out to watch these webinars. I think tonight we've got over 130 people who've registered, and I'm expecting us to be at our capacity of 100 attendees for sure. So that's the Zoom function. We're also broadcasting on YouTube Live for those who are unable to sign on tonight. And if you're not able to watch the whole presentation, you can go check out the Volleyball BC YouTube channel for the full archive. So yeah, without further ado, Ryan and Carol, can we bring you online? Hello, hello. Just want to make sure we can hear you.
Hello, everybody.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Perfect. All right. Well, we'll let you guys take it away here.
Awesome. Jay, thanks for having us. Volleyball BC, thanks for putting this on. It's been great to see all the presenters this week. And so we'll just get started here. We'll get rolling. We're going to share our screen, and away we go. There we go. Hopefully that is visible to everybody. And we're here talking about a games-based approach to training, but I think we've got just a quick little introduction. So go ahead, Carol.
All right. Thanks for joining, everybody, and for this amazing opportunity. My name is Carol. I've been coaching since 1988, so just about 32 years. And I've been fortunate to coach at almost every level there is, from 13U, actually then U9s, 9s and 10s in development, up to high school boys, high school girls, university women and men, and had a great opportunity to coach with the national program at both youth, junior, and senior women at the FISHU Games. So I've just really valued every opportunity I've had to learn from this game and be a part of it. My first opportunity to learn about games-based approach really came back at the National Coaching Institute in 1995, where I had opportunity to collaborate with Joan Vickers on a project called Decision-Based Training in Volleyball. And that's where it started for me. It changed how I coached. And to be totally honest, I wish I could go back to my first 3 years of coaching and apologize to those teams and get a do-over. But unfortunately, we don't get do-overs. We can only move forward and do it better the next time.
I got started into coaching because I married a wife who was big into coaching. And so we moved down here to the Lower Mainland because this was a dream opportunity for her. And I just started getting thrown in the mix. I was traveling at the time with a baby. I was an at-home dad. And I started assisting with the men's program. And then I started assisting with her. And then we started building Fraser Valley Volleyball Club. And just that started going. And just had some cool opportunities there to coach some youth junior teams, youth national teams, to be involved with some FISHU teams. And so it's just been a cool opportunity to be involved with a lot of different programs moving forward. And then you kind of reach different stages in life. There was a point where I had won a U18 national championship, thought I'd arrived, and then started to meet some different people down south and realized that I didn't know near what I thought I knew, and just got my eyes open to a whole new world. And this game-based approach is a part of it. A lot of that I learned from Carol as well through the process. But let's get started with it. A little bit about our coaching philosophy. In the early 90s, there was a movie, Patch Adams, and they had this phrase there that really stood out to both Carol and myself. If you treat a disease, you win or you lose. But if you treat an individual, you win no matter the outcome. And with that, we just started playing with words a little bit and thought, if you build a program, you win or you lose. But if you build an individual, you win no matter the outcome. And so that's really, we really believe that strong individuals make strong teams. That's a phrase from Marquise, and we've adapted a little bit. Journey of building strong individuals, because strong individuals build strong teams. For many years, I built it backwards. I felt that, oh, you just come into a team and you need to be selfless. You need to give of yourself. And when you miss of people's self, it makes the team weaker. And so we're on a journey of building strong individuals, and that's a fun part of the process. All right, discussion points for today. What does a game-based approach mean? What are the demands of our game? Why is games-based approach to training important? And how can we implement this at all levels?
We want to talk first about how we're approaching this games-based approach. First of all, what it's not. A games-based approach is not simply playing games or avoiding drills. For us, we really believe that it's understanding the context of the sport of volleyball, the demands that the athletes and coaches face, to create training environments that enable athletes to improve their skills and become more proficient at the sport. Using modified games, 6v6 games, and game-like drills, following the principles of motor learning, coaches can create optimal learning environments.
Started playing around this week as I was prepping for this and going, what are the demands? I had some lists, and so I just started brainstorming a little bit. And I think the demands are different for coaches than they are for players. And here's a little bit of a list that I came up with. And basically the point of the list is we have to know a lot as coaches. We have to be partly scientists, partly psychologists, partly periodization gurus. And so with all of these different topics, it requires us to know a great deal about them, because each one can contribute to the success or not success of your team. And so you're going to hear the name Carl McGowan a few different times. He's been a mentor of us, and he happened to be coaching, and he invited a rocket scientist to his office one day. And that rocket scientist and him started talking more and more. And this rocket scientist said, volleyball is harder than rocket science. You have to know so much. There are so many different areas that you have to be an expert in. And so I just want to throw a hat out to all of you coaches who are investing in this, knowing that it's really hard and that we're in this journey together. And so he's boiled down all of those different things to 5 questions that we can ask ourselves as coaches. Is what methods will I use in practice? That has to do with the structure. What mechanics are my players going to use? What are you going to be picky about? What's important to you? How am I going to motivate intellectually, emotionally, psychologically? And then what offensive and defensive systems and tactics will we use, and what players will go where in those systems? And then what shall we practice today and why? Should we practice serving? How much? Why? Should we practice blocking? How much? Why? Should we lift or condition? So these are all the questions. We're going to tackle a little bit more of that first one, is what methods are we going to use in practice? But I thought I'd throw all of these your way just to maybe they could be helpful in kind of giving you a little bit of structure and moving forward. And so principle-based coaching. As to methods, and first of all, I love that the last couple of coaches talked a little bit about principles and methods, and we're going to keep building on that. As to methods, there may be million and then some, but principles are few. The person who grasps principles can successfully select their own methods. The person who tries methods ignoring principles is sure to have trouble. Ralph Waldo Emerson. And so just a quick definition: principle, a fundamental truth that serves as a foundation, and then method, a procedure for accomplishing that. And so that's where we're going to be venturing off a little bit here. Good old John Wooden, teachers tend to follow the laws of learning better than coaches who typically don't have a teaching background. A coach is a teacher. It's important for all of us to remember.
So let's take a look at some of the laws of learning. We want to focus on 5 bodies of knowledge: specificity, transfer, whole versus part practice, progressions, and random versus blocked practice. And we want to point you to a podcast, encourage you to consider one by Coach Your Brains Out, a tribute to Carl McGowan.
And that's where a lot of this information has come from or summarized.
So the first concept we want to talk about is specificity. It's one of the most important concepts of motor learning. It's that the mind gives the body its commands. So are the commands the mind gives general or specific? If they're general, then the messages that come from our mind, the patterns, the skills, can be used for different sports. If they're specific, then the patterns we use are limited to one skill and there's limited transfer. Franklin Henry is considered the father of motor learning, said it's no longer possible to justify the concept of general abilities, such as coordination and agility, since the evidence shows that these abilities are specific to the task or activity. What that means is the principle is training must be specific to the game context. So in volleyball, training for the sport of volleyball needs to use volleyball specific activities. The second concept is transfer. Transfer of learning is defined as the influence of previous experiences on learning new skills or performing skills in new contexts. The studies are showing that there is very small amount of transfer from one task to another. They have to be identical if we're looking for transfer. In a study by Greene and Bellevue from Exercising Your Brain in 2008, they found that human beings have an amazing capacity to learn new skills and adapt to new environments. However, several objects remain to be overcome. Arguably, the most notable impediment to this goal is that learning tends to be quite specific to the training regimen and does not transfer to even qualitatively similar tasks. So the principle here is that practices must stimulate or simulate as closely as possible the game environment or context for transfer to occur. Whole versus part training. So we want to take a look at part training is the training of one part of a skill, breaking it down into segments. Whole training trains the whole skill at a time with a focus on one part at a time. From a study by Carl McGowan, Motor Learning Principles and the Superiority of Whole Training in Volleyball, he suggests that if we believe in specificity, we also believe in transfer. In 30 whole part studies that he reviewed, not one favored teaching methods that used the part method of instruction. The majority of the studies favored some variation of the whole method associated with superior learning. So again, the principle here is teach the whole skill. Progressions. Carl gave Ryan and I, well, mostly me, a really hard time in the early years about the number of progressions that Canada had established in its NCCP program. He questioned us on that and thought it was quite hilarious because there were so many progressions. So we need to look at progressions are the steps used to teach a skill, and they can be beneficial if done correctly. We need to make sure that we don't break it down so much that it no longer resembles what happens in the game or the context. Progressions must result in transfer if they're going to be effective. Rather than change the context, we need to direct athletes' attention to cues that help perform the skill better. Good cues are few in number, easy to remember, consistent, and directed at what they feel and what they see, both physical and visual motor. The principle, utilize cues to teach skills in context of the game. And finally, blocked versus random. Blocked equals executing and repeating the same skill from the same location under the same conditions. A random situation is where no two drills are exactly the same, or no two reps are exactly the same. Both of these aspects of training are important, but what varies is how much time you spend in each area. Blocked training is great for teaching an initial skill so that your athletes can understand the cues to the skill. But once they understand the cues, it's a good time to move to random training. Random happens when you play the game or in a game-like context, when everyone has less control of what's going to happen. Block training can produce excellent practice or drill players, but does not transfer to the game setting. How many of you have ever wondered why your team could perform in practice, but could never perform in a game? That happened to me, and it was because I was spending too much time doing blocked training and not enough random. The principle here is random training is better than block training most of the time.
An example from my team this past year, and I think we're all a little bit guilty, and I have to catch myself going, is this a random enough drill? Like, do we need to do this block stuff? And so because they did our floors at the LEC, they were so sticky, I was nervous about doing defensive drills like a little bit of touch 10 or Kojima or having them scramble around. So I avoided doing it. And in the end, we had one of the best defensive teams that we've ever had. We didn't do touch 10 once. And that's the first time in 20 years of coaching that I've never at least done it once. But we rarely ever got out. We got out dug one time in this entire year. But we just made sure that we're spending time doing eye work. We're spending time making sure that we're reading the game. And it was kind of an aha moment that happened a little bit by accident. There's a study by Cal Poly here, and they did it because they wanted to find a productive way to get transfer in the batter's box. And so they played around with a few things. And so a couple things was they had one group that just did regular practice every day. They had a second group that received an extra 45 pitches, but they were in order, then 15 fast, 15 curve, 15 changeup. They had a third group that received an extra 45 pitchers, but in random order. And so they never knew what was coming next. So they did this for 6 weeks, 2 times per week. Group 2, it was interesting. They started to get really confident. They got better at hitting them, and their confidence level or seemingly seemed to grow. Group 3 seemed to get just continuing frustrated, didn't seem like they were growing at all. And then they wanted to see what would happen after the 6 weeks. And here's a few results for you. Group 1 improved 6.2%. They were practicing regular, it was there. Group number 2 improved 25.8. That's a pretty good percentage of improvement. Take a look at this, 57%. And they didn't feel that they were growing, but when they finally got to the batter's box, their eye work, their ability to read really jumped out, and it really paid off down the line. It's going to scare us as coaches because it's messy. We're not going to see improvement early. Players might feel frustrated, but in the end, the growth will start to be really transformational. Yeah.
The first time that I ever implemented random training was back in 1995 when we were working on this decision training. And I was coaching a grade 11 club team for the Dinos. And my team revolted. I really essentially used them as guinea pigs. And the thing that I had to realize was that random training is really messy at first. It's really ugly. You don't see a lot of success. And so it's difficult to stick with it. And the players resisted. And I had to beg them to trust me, which they did. But over time, by the end of the season, we weren't great early in the season, but by the time we got to the provincials, we ended up in the championship final. And as a grade 11 team in the championship final of the 18U, because at that time there were only 18U and 16U. So our team outperformed what I thought we were capable of, but I really believe it was because they learned how to make more decisions on their own in a less structured environment. And once they bought in, we really saw the difference. And so I think that's a really key point to understand is it's not going to be comfortable for anybody early on. You just have to trust that it will work over time.
And if it doesn't look like volleyball, taste like volleyball, smell like volleyball, you're going to be getting better at something. It's just not volleyball. And I think we're all guilty of this as coaches. And I just want to challenge us. When we are practice planning, it needs to look like the game. If the drill that you're structuring does not happen in the game, throw it out, because you're getting better at something. It's just not volleyball. Yeah. So yeah, you can check how that relates to practice planning. And I think we're stopping here for a little break.
It is a technical timeout.
Technical timeout.
There we go. All right, I'm just getting the poll ready for everyone here. So in the meantime, you know, how does the law of learning of block versus random training, how would you say that changes based on, you know, someone who's maybe new to volleyball compared to someone who's a little bit more of an expert? So let's maybe use a 14U athlete who's just getting started. How would that principle change for that person versus, you know, someone who's on a university program?
Sure. Yeah, I think you do not need to be in blocked as long as they understand the cues. As soon as they start understanding the cues, there is a level where a 14U's ball control is not going to be the same as someone who is in university. But if they understand the cues, it's going to be messy, and you may have to create more smaller game scenarios so that they can get better. So I would do a lot more smaller game stuff with a 14U group to get them the touches so they can improve. And that's where my youngest son is at. But we're still playing a lot of games. And when we're doing that, we're making sure that we're teaching cues. If they know the cues, you don't need to spend much time in that block setting.
I think one of the problems that, or maybe challenges that coaches put themselves in is because we're looking for early success, and we think that an athlete needs to experience early success to gain confidence, we probably make the mistake of going to too many blocked drills because they get really good at that. But then when we get in the game, they can't do it in the game. And then they're frustrated why. So I think we really have to try to stay as random as possible, but really direct to the right cues in training so that we see that transfer in competition.
And it even relates to just doing a setting drill, for example. If you look at that Cal Poly study, we should be random in what we're doing. If we do like 1051s, 1031s, 10 steps, that's exactly what the Cal Poly study is everybody's reading, everybody knows what's coming. The passer knows, the setter knows. We've got to add some variability to what we're doing so that we can create a little bit more transfer.
Okay. Speaking of cues, can you guys maybe just walk us through some examples of cues you use for, let's say, attacking, and you know, how you would go about, again, applying that cue in a game, and maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves because you'll cover this, but yeah, so just some examples of cues you use and how that looks in a training environment.
Yeah. Attacking, I like to talk about footwork. Footwork for me is pretty important. And so we're going to have a few ones where we're just 5 and 4, and it's this little shuffle move that they're going to do. They're going to get outside. We're going to want to talk about it a little bit inside. I like talking about a double arm lift. And so for us, that's a cue. I don't talk about shoulder high, but can we get open? So getting open, getting torqued. And a lot of times different cues will be for different people. And so I find some people will resonate with something. And sometimes I've had to try it if there's one athlete, let's say, who's having trouble torquing. And so I've got to get them open to the court, and we'll say, hey, I got this from Benjo. Get basically your belt buckle open to the corner of the court, or get your numbers facing the crowd. And so if we can find these external cues that are outside of their body, they can picture and they can do a little bit more with it. And so, and then I love the whip snap or the wrist snap that Mike talked a little bit about yesterday. And so, and then basically looking to just follow through. Can your hand hit your pocket? And so we're going to find things that are outside of their body that they can resonate with.
It's interesting that you bring up attacking. I've heard it said a number of times that attacking is one of the hardest skills in all of sport, that and hitting a fastball in baseball, because it's two moving objects trying to collide. So of all of the skills we have in volleyball, attacking is probably the one where I spend more time in a blocked setting and even in a part setting, because it's got so many, it is a very complex skill with many parts.
Mhm.
What I have learned with, I coach 14U boys now, and what I've learned with them is I still make them do the whole skill as they're working on it, but we might spend more time focused just on their footwork. I never make them just do footwork without a jump and a swing, even if the swing's ugly or they're jumping wrong. We're focused on that footwork, but then we bring in other parts of it, and it does take more time to attack. The good thing about that skill is they love to do it, so they want to spend more time doing it. But I think it's important to let them be a little bit creative as well. One of the things I think we've done in volleyball is we have in many ways tried to package everyone the same, and so we got to give them a bit of freedom to do things in their own way and find maybe some new ways to score that we're not used to seeing.
Okay. And how, I guess, how would you go about, you see an athlete attacking and they're doing something that's really hurting their ability to, I don't know, hit the ball high, hit the ball hard, or score. And so, is that, in that particular situation, how are you looking at the laws of learning to guide how you maybe change that athlete's, approach footwork or arm swing or what have you?
Yeah, one thing, if I'm seeing someone who's not contacting at their high point, it has nothing to do with their elbow, and it's everything to do with where they're coming through. So I'll just raise the net on them. That's a great way of creating an external feedback. All of a sudden you jack that net up 6 inches and they've got to try to hit high and deep, or I'll just put some cones deep on the floor and say, hey, you need to attack this shot deep, and you've got to start clearing the block. Typically when you put a block in their world, and if they're not attacking deep, it gets fixed pretty quick, or they're not attacking high because they realize that they can't score. And so I like the game teaching them as well, because we'll have freshmen come in and all of a sudden they're hitting against girls who are touching 10-3 and they're not scoring anything. And so for them, they're going to be learning pretty fast of how they have scoring, how they need to hit high, and then we can create some external feedbacks, and then using video and using opportunities to say, hey, you got to reach that ball a little bit higher. But it's a hard process to fix. Swing mechanics is probably the most difficult motor pattern to switch I've found in my experience.
What do you feel like is the most trainable motor pattern?
Passing. And then maybe footwork for attacking is footwork to attacking. I find the most easiest that athletes can pick up. And I find that 14U, I can teach them patterns. They've got it.
Awesome.
I had a bit of an aha moment this year. I think I put words to what I had been thinking about maybe, but it really resonated when I started coaching my boys team, because I realized just how important it is to start with movement. So I didn't start training the skills, I start training them how to move. And once they knew how to move, then I focused on the skill. So there was always movement before or after the skill. So when you're talking about attacking, I didn't let them attack in hitting lines. They had to transition off the net first, or they had to go from a passing position, transition out to get ready to attack. And once they learned how to move, it became easier because they got rhythm, they got their timing better, and they just really, all the pieces started coming together because they knew there was another job that had to happen. And I think that's really a key learning for me even this year.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think that maybe speaks to the specificity, right? And making sure that, the skill is the whole part of that action. So great. Couple more here. We'll just keep rolling through. Maybe explain to us how you go about communicating the core principles of learning to athletes and to maybe even to parents, and maybe even coaches in within the club. How does that communication take place?
I'm hoping that coaches can talk to, I know different coaches that we've had will have team meetings with their athletes or with their parents. And hopefully in that meeting, we can encourage them to just start talking with coaches and say, hey, this is what the laws of learning are, and this is how we're going to be doing things in practice. And so when I think of it, I think that's a great question that we can probably do a little bit better job of. Anything you want to add with that?
Yeah, I think helping parents understand that what you're teaching, especially if you're going to move from traditional style to more random, because it also impacts feedback, and we're going to talk about that. But that traditional style, they're not going to be comfortable with it either, and they're going to maybe think that you're out of your mind and question, like, do you really know what you're doing, because you don't do it like everybody else or like they've done it in the past. So when it comes to parents, I think that's probably a really important communication tool that the coach should use. I'll answer for Ryan how he does it with his athletes, and I've learned from him and implement it where I can. Whiteboard, whiteboard, whiteboard. If you don't have 2 whiteboards in your gym, you don't have access to one, that should be a key tool that everyone should be trying to get in the practice facilities they're in. Whether you get a portable one or there's one on the wall, invest in those markers and use it, because everyone needs to see the cues and be reminded of them. And if they're up there regularly, they're going to learn those. I think the cues are also incredibly important for clubs to start using the same ones. I'm not necessarily advocating that every club use the same cues, but within the club, so those athletes, what they're learning at U12 and 13 is the same message they're getting at U17, U18. And I think that will help them as they go.
One thing I've done personally is I've tried to learn something new in the summertime, this off season. And then I've taken those lessons and I've actually done a little presentation with one of our core values, create a safe place to learn, and showed them what I've learned this summer about learning. And usually it resonates with some of the topics that we've been talking about here, some of the laws of learning, the frustrations I had, and it just made me a better teacher to recognize how frustrating it is to change.
Awesome. Okay, we'll go one more here really quick. Yeah, how does, the blocked versus random training environment, how does that maybe change throughout the season? So, is there a different, is there more of one method of training at, let's say early part of the season? Is there less of it or more of it at the end near a major competition? Walk us through how that maybe evolves throughout a season.
Yeah, it shifts. I would say earlier on, we're going to have more. It's going to be a little bit blocked, but it's not going to be overly consumed. As soon as they understand the cues for me, what I think early on you'll see in my gym a lot more is just a lot of smaller groups, a lot of 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4 scenarios, so that people can get the touches, so we can get them to where they need to. But for sure, there's a little bit more blocked at the beginning than it is near the end. And so it's going to slowly shift over. But I would say earlier on, there's a lot more small game stuff so that we can get their touches in place, so we can get them caught up if they're behind.
Yeah, I would agree. I think at the younger levels, when you're teaching a new skill, you might spend a little bit more time in blocks, but I would really caution against how much time in a practice. I'm not as concerned about how much you do it throughout the year, because I think you do it when you need it. It should be what you go to when you need, but then you get out of it as quickly as possible.
Oh yeah, that's great. Awesome. Okay, well that's good for now. We'll let's keep going on with the presentation.
Okay. Let's get through this. Sorry. All right. John Kessel is a huge proponent of using the game, and this was one of his studies that he threw out there. You can check it out if you want. He is a great resource in all aspects of the game. The articles that he puts out are pretty phenomenal, but you can kind of see what the best 166 games, and you can see that likely 150 of those are just playing volleyball. And so I want to take you a little bit through one of my practices, and I just threw this on one of my handy dandy whiteboards, but just kind of a practice that I would say we did multiple times this year, and a progression process that can kind of show you a little bit of how we're going to do this. And I did this early in the season, and I also did this late in the season, and I would do this at all levels with all opportunities. And so as soon as my athletes are warmed up, they've done a little bit of butterfly, they've played a little 2-on-2 short court, we've tutored our setters. So we make sure we tutor our setters almost every day in some capacity. If we have only one court, then we're tutoring them while we're doing a little bit of butterfly. But as you can see here, this is kind of an attacking drill, and we're working with some outside hitters. And you can see on the top left there, we're working on serve, receive to attack. And you can pick whatever it is that you want to work on. And so it could be footwork, it could be a double arm lift, it could be shot range, it could be attacking different parts of the court, it could be off speeding, it could be high point or inside. And so, and this is more of a block setting. So we got a coach entering a ball in, you can pick how you want that ball to get entered. We've got players making a decision, they're working on their seams early, and then they've got to pass and swing, or no pass and then swing, and they're just going to hit the ball, shag it, and go around. So it's a pretty blocked setting. We've already likely earlier in the season gone through what's expected, so they know what their footwork patterns are going to be like. They're going to know that their right foot coming inside is going to be on the sideline coming in, so we're a little bit inside the court. And so from there, we're also going to spend about 10 minutes total, 10-15 minutes, and then we're also going to do transition to attack. I think teaching transition is still one of the big missed golden nuggets that if club coach starting to add, connecting it, serve, receive to attack, attack to block, block to D, and then continuing it on, it's going to progress for you. Yeah.
You'll notice with these two drills that they actually look like they're much more blocked drill. But really they're not, because if you look at the coach and the type of ball they're entering in and the number of decisions that the athletes have to make, that's what makes this drill actually random. So it's still a drill, it's not a game, but it's in the game context. So the coach is sending in a bowl or a serve or a different type of ball, and they're random, so the athlete doesn't know. And it's while the drawing looks like it's going at the libero, it could go at any of them. So really, this is a more random drill, but allows you to train with a smaller group if you have smaller numbers, which in this COVID time, this might actually be all we get. But it's also a progression that is easy to build on and allows the athlete to learn and still gives that really game focus because they're making some decisions. Of course, it's not as random as what it would look like in a full 6-on-6, but this gets lots of touches in a small amount of time.
I call this a tweener drill. And I would go and watch Jim McGowan. He was at University of Washington, and he'd come up with all these in-between drills. It's not this block drill. It's not this 6-on-6. It's this tweener that is just really getting and working on really important things, but it looks like the game. This looks like the game of volleyball when we take it. And then what I'll take this, and you can see below it is it's 2-on-2, but it's 4-on-4 Monarch. And you can take as many players as you have. And you can see I've grouped them 1 to 6. I put 1 and 2 together. I've put 3 and 4 together, 5 and 6. And it starts with a serve. And they're serving out a libero, and there's a setter going on there. And you could have the setters alternating and maybe the liberos alternating. But it looks and starts like it would in volleyball. Now, once they start playing this thing out, it's going to get messy. It's 4-on-4. But they're going to have to work a little harder on defense. There's only 1-on-1 blocks, but they're getting the numbers. You need to have some of this in order to get enough touches. If you just do 6-on-6, you're going to miss out on some really important touches there. And so how we like to do it is we do a serve, and then a coach bowls the ball over. And team 1 needs to win both of those in order to stay. If they don't, they're out, and the team at the net goes under, and they go to the back line and serve. And so you can do this with odd numbers, even numbers. You could just have the team that hit go under. There's a lot of different variances to this. And so this is 2 that we like to do. I like to have a 4-step approach to kind of building on. So let's say we've been working on our double arm lifts. We started at the top in progression 1. We've been cueing it. We've been focusing on it. We're going to take it to this 4-on-4. I'm going to be giving feedback. The coaches are going to be giving feedback. Hey, double arm lift. Hey, we'll be asking questions. Hey, what did you think of your double arm lift there? They're like, oh, I kind of forgot about it. Okay, boom, they do it again. What did you think? I thought it was okay. It was awesome. Like a lot of times they'll be really reluctant to, so I'm not too sure. And then you can really reinforce it and you can make them smile and you can ask a lot of questions. I've changed a lot as a coach. I used to be this, I was giving them all the information and I'm this teacher and I'm this professor that's giving them all this information. And now I've just gone to this facilitator that's just asking them questions. And when they start to process it in their own mind, the transfer gets faster. You don't feel as good as a coach because you're not unloading this unbelievable amount of wealth of knowledge that you have, but it doesn't help their transfer. And then I'm going to take it, and then we've got this, I like to call it attack versus D, and it's, for us, it's one of the cornerstones. We do it weekly. It's something that happens on a regular basis. I group my team up in outside hitter, middle, and an outside hitter. And that's group 1, group 2, group 3, and depends on how many people you have. You could only have 2 groups. You could have 3 groups. Sometimes I have 4 groups and I have to fill in and people go twice. But you can see on the right-hand side there that you've got group number 1, they're with 1 setter and 1 libero. And here we're still using this 6-on-6 to give a lot of feedback. 12 balls are all gonna go to group number 1. At 6, the setters and liberos are going to switch with the other side. 2s and 3s, they're going to switch front and back at 6. But they're going to get 12 really nice opportunities to work on whatever cue that we're spending some time on. And if a serve gets missed, coach pops the ball in. If someone gets aced, coach pops the ball in so that we can get their numbers and they can have an opportunity to work on this. And so you can do a lot of different variations. You can have a serve. We like to bounce the ball, and then the team send over a free ball rather than just a bowl. So if a bowl, that means the coach is just putting it over. We found when the team sends it over, they get a little bit of a tougher free ball. You can transition where the coach is at the net, putting it over. And then a virus is a ball where we just throw it at the setter. The setter has to take it. And then we've got some out of system setting going on, which is really good. You can put some constraints where, hey, the bounce ball has to go to the middle. The first ball has to go to the middle. You can do whatever you want, but after 12 balls, boom, next group comes in and I get through my whole team that way. Our setters are getting good touches, liberos, we've got decision-making, we've got all these parts mixing. I rarely do starters versus non-starters. We did it less this year than we've ever done it before. And I was a little nervous at first about that, but all this part mixing really made us really competitive with each other and just created a really good group. And then after this attack versus D, we'll move into something called French 3-ball or 4-ball or 6-ball. You can use however you would like it, but this is almost done daily. Maybe daily would be a little bit of an exaggeration because my girls get want a little bit of variety. But for me, this drill we use all the time. So you can kind of see, you see different variations in black below the drill. We like to go 6 balls one way and then 6 balls the other way, but they're in a rotation. And so you'll see this grid down below where there's one team, top one group's in rotation 5, one group's in rotation 6, and we'll go 6 balls one way and then we'll go 6 balls the other. And those 6 balls will be varied. There'll be a serve, there'll be a bounce, there'll be a virus, and we'll do that times 2. And we'll go through all the rotations like that. Or you can put a transition ball in there. You can enter these balls in a variety of different ways, but we're sitting there and we're coaching this double arm lift because that's the cue that we're picking on for this time. Or we're coaching a system and we're saying, hey, you need to stay in this positioning. We're talking about positioning. And you can make sure, oh, the first rally's got to be perfect. If the first rally isn't perfect, we're redoing it. And so I got that from Tom Black when I watched him do that. Lights just went off for me. It's going, whoa, we can keep doing this until, so I've got a middle blocker who's cheating all the time. You've got to stay central. You move, oh, we just redo it. And so you can kind of just pick up on it. You could do 4-on-4 near the end, where we did that near the end of the season where we wanted to speed things up. And then another quicker one is 0-0. And you basically just alternate 3 balls each way. And it's the first to 25. And so for us, this is a really important staple in our gym. And you could live on a couple of those drills when it comes to 6-on-6 at least. At least I do. And then we have some standards there where if we don't reach 4 out of 6, after we're finished, we go back and we need to get that 4 out of 6 to reach our standards. There we go. Okay, so that was the last one there. Open up to some questions, Jay.
Awesome. We're going to be on time for the first time in the Volleyball BC Coached Development Web Series. This is great. All right. I still got to add some more questions to the polls. If our viewers, if we could just start typing away on some questions, that could help me kind of get the polls going and get the conversation rolling. I think maybe walk us through a little bit on how that progression could be adjusted for, again, 14U level athlete. Let's say they're having a tough time putting bump set spike together. So maybe it's hard to do a French 3 if we can't even sequence the bump set spike. So maybe walk us through some different adjustments you would make for a more novice learner.
Sure. I'll jump on that one because that's exactly what I had to do this year. A lot of the same drills or similar drills that Ryan would use with his team, I was able to use with my team. And it wasn't because they were so highly skilled. It was just because we focused the parameter on what were we trying to get at. And so if you can stay true to it, maybe it changes how you enter the first ball. A little less random for early learners. The more random it is, the harder it is and the messier it's going to be. So if you can reduce the number of decisions, I wouldn't say to 0, that's the one of the things I struggle with triple ball is 0 decision making. I think we need to have some decision making in there, but maybe it doesn't have to be 5 decisions. It needs to be 1 or 2. So I think there's a way to change that by controlling that the first ball that's entered. At 14U, obviously, serving and passing is so critical. And the team typically that wins the game is going to be the one that serves well or passes well. And so while I don't want ever my servers to not serve well, I want them going in and serving tough, but they could probably ace their teammates more than we would get to play. So we just make sure we have that ace +1. If the ball gets aced here, the coach has given you 1 because we got to get that rep in and we're still going to run what we're doing. So we're never telling kids to back off or not try to do their very best. But I think a lot of early learners, well, every athlete needs to know that there's freedom to fail always, that actually failure is going to help us learn. And so by being in a situation where the drill might break down, it's my responsibility as a coach to keep the pace going so that we can get it back on track. And if it's a redo, it's a redo, that's okay. But it just gives them that opportunity. We also use one that Ryan actually pulled a few years ago, encore 3 fois. Again, 3 times. So
I call it redos now.
Redos. We give our kids a chance if they make a mistake to go and do it again 3 times. And even if it means I'm stopping the whole drill and I'm letting them fix it, it's just a way to control it in a way that allows us to still get the number of reps in. Does that make sense?
Awesome. Yeah, and no, that's great. So another, I think, issue that club coaches are having with maybe younger teams, or maybe it's even older teams, maybe this happens in your gym, Ryan, is that there's a skill discrepancy between, maybe your top player and your 15th player. And so that, using a games-based approach, how do you adjust the environment, or maybe even the cues for, the variability between players?
Kick them out.
Well, having a tutor court and having a 6-on-6 court helps. This year we ran 20 athletes on two teams of 10 for 14U, but we trained together. So we always had 2 courts, and we would do 6-on-6 within our 2 teams, but then we'd have the other 4 athletes from each team tutoring on the other court. If it wasn't a drill where it was cyclical and they could easily slip in. So some of those God bless them, drill killers might
Mhm.
need to be taken aside and given a few more opportunities to get some reps to help. But again, not just static reps with no decision making. We have to try to make them as game-like as possible.
Yeah, I've taken athletes aside and just given them extra reps on their own. And so just to really help them get caught up, because it is a fact of life that you are going to get some people who just are really going to bring the level down. And you've got to work with them. You've got to keep a variety of who they're playing with. You've got to put them with sometimes with the best player out there. And that best player's got to find a way of being successful with them, being with them. And so that's some of the decisions that you can make as a coach. That's part of the fact. And it's just, sometimes you can avoid their influence a little bit, but I think we all have them. I have a few every year whose levels are just a little bit lower. And by the end, if you keep them involved, they get caught up. I had some girls that did a wonderful job this year, came in and just kept working hard. And by the end, it was pretty seamless.
Mhm.
It's an important thing to remember as a coach that if they're not doing what we've asked them to do, they haven't learned it yet. We haven't taught them well enough. So it's our job to make sure we put them in an environment to continue to help them learn. No kid is coming into practice not wanting to be good at this game. They want to learn, they want to do it well, but they are going to make mistakes and they need to know it's okay. And their teammates, everyone on the team has to understand that we're all in this together, especially at 14U with fair play. Everyone's going to be on the floor and we're only as good as everyone collectively working together. So having that environment where you're free to make mistakes, but you also are given extra opportunities when you make mistakes too often is key.
Yeah, great. So we talked about transfer from, the practice environment to the game situation. And I think one area that coaches are asking questions on is how we can maybe simulate, there's an athlete who's working through the progressions, they're taking chances, they're working through the cues, but then they get to a game where there's real pressure, there's real competition, and maybe they're not actually doing the cues you've been working on. So, what are some strategies to help players work through that, trying to go out there, compete, win games, because that is important at some levels, and then to also, use the cues they've been working on in practice.
I sit there with a pen and paper, and when I look really closely at my athletes in preseason stuff to see what stuck and what hasn't. And you're able to see them in 6-on-6 when you're in the drill to see what's progressing and what's not. But if I don't see them doing the different things that we've been working on, that's on me as a coach. I know there's others that might kind of get on them about that, but if a player is not doing what I've wanted them to learn and taught, then I haven't taught it well enough. And so I go back to the drawing board and I got my list, and then we put a little bit of a list on a whiteboard which says, hey, Susie, you're working on your double arm lift this week, or you're working on just simple and smooth. You're working on wrist and hands with your platform, just to make sure that it's always there and it's visible. And so we've got a list for them as a group. Individuals have a list, and it just kind of keeps them fresh. But it's on us to kind of keep going back to the drawing board and encouraging them. I've had people work on stuff for 4 years, and it's just taken that long for them to get the things that you want. Either I'm a bad coach and I think here's another thing is we have to go at the pace of the learner. Not everybody is the same. Some people will pick things up fast, and other people, it will take years, and you just got to be patient.
Mm-hmm. And I guess speaking to that, how do you deal with like that frustration? Like Susie's just not getting it, and it's taken a while for her to learn that one cue you're working on. And what are some strategies you can use to help that learner deal with maybe their emotions or their perception of how they're not learning or learning?
The number one thing that I try to implement is to be a non-anxious presence, because the emotional state that they're in, the emotions will be connected to the learning process. And you've got to find a way of making it a safe place to learn that's non-threatening, that is not fear-based, that's not threatening. They're not doing push-ups if they miss their serve. They're not doing all these things that are punishment because of it, because they're going to connect the emotions to that skill. And you've got to find a way that when they think of that skill, it's not related to fear or doubt or scared or frustration, that it's actually somehow connected to just kind of a positive, productive way of looking at it. So I want to be a non-anxious presence. I want them to know that I'm on their side, that it's not me against them. They haven't done it. Oh, now my ego's getting involved. I've got to be this non-anxious present that just, hey, slowly encourages them, ask them questions, let their vent out their frustrations, and then keep working forward.
I think for younger coaches or coaches of younger athletes, I'll put it that way, need to also understand that there's only so much information that they can take in a given training session. And I think we try to impart so much knowledge that sometimes they tune us out because they just want to go and work on what they've been working on, or they want some time to be creative. I found that with my 14U boys, and I had to remind myself, okay, it's not personal. They don't not like me, but their attention span just isn't the same as someone who's 16, 17, 18. And so I had to really be creative with how we ran our training session so that we gave them some time to be creative. We gave them some time to be fun. My standard was no goofy. We're not going to allow them to be goofy, but I let them go back and have some freedom to play with their serve and rip at jump serves and hit it as hard as they can in any way they want, just to, try to do different things. But when we got goofy is when I really had to rein them back in and remind them, look, I'm giving you some freedom, but let's keep this productive. Otherwise, why are we here?
So I read a great quote today. Average players want to be left alone. Good players want to be coached, and great players want to be told the truth. I thought, yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, no, great. What are some areas do you feel like, or what are some skills that you feel that could be like we can give athletes more freedom with? So you mentioned serve. Like, do you feel like that's maybe a skill where we can really say, you know what, let's try and use a games-based approach for them to explore and discover what works for them? Or is that maybe an area where we want to have a certain singular way for our team? Like, maybe walk us through a little bit about that and comparing different skills.
I'm fairly, I don't know if I want to say regimented, but we have everybody has their opinion on what's going to be the most effective way of doing things. And so I do like a little bit of freedom with their serve. There's parts of their mechanics that will be pretty structured as to what I want them to do, but then I'll give them a little bit of freedom as to finding out what their best serve is. I never go back there and say, hey, serve to 1, serve to 6. They get to go back there and serve their serve. What's their serve? And it might be a seam at the second seam, or maybe the third seam, maybe a sideline serve. It might be a drop serve. And so I rarely tell my players what to do, and then unless there's a massive discrepancy on the other side. I think attacking is another area. I'm not telling them where to hit, when to hit, but with Hillary this year, I used a thing, say, hey, I want you to go up there and play a little bit of chess, not just checkers. And it's a Kobe quote. Kobe's going, everybody else is playing checkers. I'm playing chess out there. And so I challenged Hillary. I said, Hillary, you need to go up there and play a little bit of chess. And so she was just hitting. I'm like, hey, if you put some off speed in there, you're going to be able to create a little bit of give and go. And so all of a sudden off speed's going in there, and it just opened up other things for her. And so it's just finding language that just really resonates with them.
Awesome. Just looking here through some of the other questions we got. Wasn't able to get the poll up, but we're still got a lot of questions here, so we'll keep going. So yeah, here, I mean, again, like we talked a little bit about the athlete that's getting frustrated, but what about the coach, right? Like we're working really hard on this certain cue we've been working on, and is there a point where we say, you know what, we're not working on this anymore, right? Like maybe a goofy footed approach. That's a good, easy, maybe example, or a one that I think all comes to mind. Like at what point do we say, you know what, do we have to change our thinking here and maybe give up on the athlete, or is that even something that crosses your mind?
Maybe I'll take this one to start. I don't think I would ever give up on an athlete. I would try, I would try, especially when they're young, I would try to figure out what's holding them back. So to me, goofy footed is not a permanent thing. I think it can be changed, but I think the more coaches that let it go when they're young and push them forward, the less likely it is for the athlete to be able to change, and the more they'll be held back long term, not to mention the injury factor. But for me, the question comes down to the athlete, because I ask a lot of questions, like Ryan mentioned, what did your feet do there? If they tell me, well, I don't know, then I'd be like, well, they're your feet. Like, you need to know. And so it's helping the athletes start to know what their body is doing, because that's how we can start to correct things. If all we do is tell them what they did, they won't correct it as fast as if we start asking them what they did, because once they connect the feeling to the thinking, they're going to be able to problem solve themselves better and make that adjustment, I believe.
I've adjusted kids with goofy footedness. I'm going to shout out Joel Pessett. Talk to Joel. He'll fix your players' goofy footedness in a day. So Joel, you're on the hook for that. I think you're watching. I've adjusted things like swing blocking. I've had just athletes just really struggle to swing, and they just were costing us points. So I'm just saying, hey, you're going to shuffle over. There does come a time when there are some things that you just have to adjust to some people's strengths, and it's just part of the fact. But I'd never give up on an athlete. I just kind of adjust and just tweak certain things. Just like we'll have defensive systems. You've got a weak defender out there. We're going to try a way of protecting them, and we're not going to kind of make it known to everybody. We're just going to protect them subtly so that they don't feel embarrassed about it.
Awesome. I'm going to pick up on something you kind of mentioned there, Carol, in terms of just like having the athlete like see and then be able to do or execute a skill. And so maybe walk us through how you are cueing, teaching athletes to see, to pick up cues and make decisions based on what they see. Maybe work us through that process within that game context.
Well, I think it starts with when we start working on a drill or a game in practice. We'll tell them what to look for. Like, we'll give them some things we want you to be looking for. And then it's asking the question, what did you see there? Or where were you looking there? And if they don't know, like, especially young kids, it could be very much that they just have no idea. Then I might remind them, hey, this is what we're looking for. Go back and try it again. I think as you progress through, having those cues on the board, again, here's what we're looking at, here's what we're working towards, I think will help. The better they get, the more comfortable they get with the skill, I think the easier it's going to be for them when they're actually under, well, no, the research probably is the other way. It goes down when they get under pressure. That's why we need to create pressure situations in practice that include what they're going to actually see in a game and what they need to be looking for and feeling. One thing I'm not really great at, but I know some coaches who are, and I think it makes them highly effective, is video feedback. So some athletes need to see what they're doing before they can actually feel what they're doing. They won't believe you if you tell them they're doing something. And I mean, almost every one of us has an iPhone now. Kevin Brownlee told me about an app called the Coach's Eye. It's brilliant. You can quickly put it in there. You can slow-mo for your kids. You can pull them off out of a drill, or when they come off, and just say, hey, I want you to take a look at this. This is what you're doing. And remember, this is what we've been working on. So then send them back in. Now they've seen it. They've seen what they're doing. But the most effective learning comes when they can see through their mind's eye themselves doing it, not like a video. So one part will help, but we got to get them to transition to, now I know what I'm doing, because they get that kinesthetic awareness.
Awesome. All right, gang. I think that's it. We're just over 8 o'clock right now, and I think we've answered a good chunk of questions here. Thanks so much for coming online. I liked having 2 people to talk to this time instead of just one, so that's great. And yeah, is there maybe some way the people in the audience can get a hold of you if they have any other questions that we maybe just didn't get to?
Yeah, first of all, my gym is always open. And so if anybody wants to come into my gym, anybody is welcome. If you email me, you can call me. My email is ryan.hofer@twu.ca. Carol's is hofer@twu.ca. It's on the Trinity Western website. But if you want to talk volleyball, shoot me a thing. I've always got try to work on little projects and different things. And so I would love to talk shop. I believe we can learn from everybody. I've learned so much doing mini volleyball, just going into gyms and talking to elementary school teachers. Like, there's good stuff out there.
Awesome.
Shout out to all you coaches who are using this time to get better. I mean, what an incredible opportunity we have here. We may not get to be in the gym with our athletes, but the fact that you're all tuning into this and to other Pro D opportunities, our athletes are going to be way better for it when we do get back in the gym. So look forward to that day.
Awesome. All right. And we got one more opportunity tomorrow where we've got Julie Young coming on, and she'll be talking about how we can help foster a high performance mindset for our athletes. So looking forward to that one. And yeah, hopefully we see everyone there tomorrow night at 7. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jay.
You. Bye-bye.
Good night.